Shaheed. Shaheed wasn't old enough to spell his name, but he was old enough to know what it meant. He wasn't old enough to hear the shrieks of his own tears when they hit the ground. Shrieks loud enough to push a lump up his throat, but not loud enough for them to throw the lump out of his body. His body was a dumping ground. He had enough lumps to abet death, but just not enough for a doctor to detect. Shaheed never understood why his tears sounded like his mother, or why he would surround himself with them when she wasn't around. Shaheed was just like me. He had big dreams. He was old enough to be an actor, but not quite old to be the president. He wanted to be so rich. He wanted to be so rich, so bad that he did odd jobs after school like cleaning windows, delivering vegetables, polishing shoes, and buying time with all the money that he got in return. And he bought enough time till the war. One day at school, the teacher declared that they needed the boys to be soldiers at the front. And as she read out names like targets, and as she read out names like targets, and as she read out names like targets, the class, they let out a sorrowful sigh. And the sigh shot arrows that murdered the existing ones on the clock. Don't get me wrong. He loved his country enough to have purple skin, enough to not blame his country after he lost his father to the war, but Shaheed had other plans. He had bigger dreams, and the biggest was to be rich. Not for himself, but for his mother. He wanted her to see how fulfilling life can be. So when the teacher called out his name and handed him a gold key, he heard his mother's shriek ripping through his body. The teacher said, "Shaheed, this is the key to paradise. This is the key to paradise. The gold key. The key that's going to take you to heaven when you die in war." And suddenly, his body straightened as if all the hope in the air filled all the cavities in his bones. Shaheed was going to fight the war. Shaheed was going to go to heaven. Shaheed had the gold key to alleviate his mother of the poverty. Like all the other boys, he hung the key around his neck like a medal, waiting to catch dreams. All the other boys, they started trying every lock that they saw, hoping it would quickly open the door to heaven, but Shaheed knew better. He kept it close to his chest. It was almost as if death had given him a memory to safekeep. At nights back home, he'd sing his mother the songs of martyrs, the patriotic songs that he'd learnt at school. And then he'd gently kiss the key. And then even more gently, his mother's forehead. And then the key. and then her forehead, and then the key, and then her forehead, then the key, and then her forehead. It was almost as if he was fabricating time and confusing it. Shaheed was good at buying time, remember? And he bought enough time till the war bus came to pick him up. That day, the sky was crying. The air reeked of pain, and before his mother could smell it, before she could hear it, he said to her, "I've talked to the teacher. She'll send you this key after the war. Please sell it and live a better life." And before his mother's vision could obscure his existence, he got lost in chants and war songs. Shaheed wasn't old enough to handle the weight of a gun, but he was old enough to know that today he was going to die. When the kids reached the war front, they were commanded to catch the bullets that came flying towards them like butterflies. They were told that paradise lay on the other side. The kids were old enough to follow commands, but not old enough to question them. At the sound of the first shot, the kids started running towards paradise, their keys banging against their chests, sounding like death chants borrowed from war songs. But only the boys could hear the song. And then suddenly, the minefield started exploding like firecrackers, celebrating a farce. But nothing affected Shaheed. He was blinded by the music. He was deafened by his mother's scent until he caught a bullet in his chest. He braved it like a lump and let the teardrop touch the ground. And he fell. Shaheed had enough life to move, but not enough to live. With all the life that he had, he picked up his key and inserted it into the keyhole that the bullet made in his chest. As he unlocked the wound, he heard his father's laughter. Calming him down, he looked around and saw how everybody on the ground was holding on to the key. Just waiting to go to heaven. So he closed his eyes and waited. Shaheed was old enough to become a story, but not old enough to tell it. Shaheed was old enough to go to war. Shaheed was old enough to live up to his name, but he wasn't old enough to understand the difference between gold and plastic.